At 5:19 local time, the sea lies still and empty. Then, almost at once, 3 contacts appear on the radar scope. Not clutter, not weather, clean returns, surface tracks, range 22 nautical miles, bearings offset, speeds increasing. Inside the Combat Information Center, no one raises their voice. No one grabs a microphone too quickly. The system speaks first. Tracks classify automatically. Course vectors spread across the display. 3 surface contacts are closing in. On the flight deck, a yellow shirt stops mid-step. An aircraft tug idles for a moment, then powers down. The catapults remain cold, but the deck falls quiet in that subtle way only sailors recognize. It is not panic, it is focus. New contacts bearing 214 through 231. The watch officer leans in, eyes fixed on the plot. These are not fishing boats. Their profiles are too sharp. Their speed changes too deliberate. No AIS, no radio traffic. At 5:21, the contacts accelerate again. 20 knots, then 24. The carrier stays on course. Inside CIC, long-range cameras begin cueing automatically. Electro-optical feeds flare to life across auxiliary screens. Through the haze, gray hulls begin to emerge. Still distant, but impossible to mistake. Low silhouettes, squared bows, compact superstructures, warships. One technician adjusts the gain, another tags the feed, timestamps lock into place. Every second is being captured. Maintain steady course, no shouting, no theatrics. At 5:23, the spacing between the 3 contacts starts to close. They are no longer moving in parallel. They are building something intentional. One ship holds the center line. 2 drift outward, opening the angle. A fan. That geometry matters. Ships that shadow usually trail or match pace. Ships that intercept cut across. This is neither. This is something more controlled. A slow equation of containment drawn across open water. Range now 60 nautical miles. The identification officer studies the imagery frame by frame. Mast layout. Sensor placement. Gun mounts forward. He does not rush. He does not need to. Then the flags come into view. The image sharpens. On the aft mast of the lead ship, a block of color snaps into focus. North Korea. No one in the room reacts outwardly. No one repeats the country name. It goes into the log. That is enough. At 5:26, the closest point of approach calculation updates. Projected CPA drops below 3 nautical miles. Too close to be accidental, too close to blame on navigation. The officer of the deck glances once at the repeater, then back toward the forward viewports. The horizon still looks calm, empty, misleading. Conditions set. Key stations manned. No siren, no announcement over the 1MC, just a quiet change in posture moving through the ship like a held breath. Below decks, watertight doors remain open, but sailors adjust their footing. Helmets are kept close, gloves go on, pens hover over logs. At 5:28, the outer ships change course by 2 degrees each. Small corrections, deliberate corrections. They are tightening the angle, guiding the carrier's projected path into a narrowing corridor. Still no radio calls, no warnings, no explanation. The carrier continues straight ahead. Speed unchanged. 45,000 tons do not flinch. On deck, a Seahawk begins to spin up. Not aggressively, not in a rush, simply prepared. Its blades blur into a flat gray disc as it lifts and settles off the starboard quarter. High enough to observe, far enough to remain neutral. Cameras keep rolling. At 14 nautical miles, the lead North Korean ship adds speed again. Its wake stretches longer. The bow presses harder into the water. The shift is subtle, but the computer marks it immediately. Intent confirmed. This is no longer mere presence. This is pressure. Inside CIC, the timeline compresses. Bearings refresh faster. Distance falls in steady increments. Every variable remains stable except one. Them. At 5:31, the CPA slips below 2 nautical miles. That number lingers on the screen longer than the others. 2 miles is not collision distance. It is miscalculation distance. It is the margin where one wrong helm order, one misread signal, can turn steel into world news. The carrier does not maneuver. The Seahawk shifts slightly, keeping all 3 ships in frame. And somewhere between the silence on the bridge and the steady hum of electronics below, the truth settles over the ship. This is real. The next move will decide who controls what happens next. At 5:33 local time, the geometry is impossible to ignore. 3 contacts, 3 vectors, no randomness left on the plot. The center ship holds course, steady and disciplined, aimed not at the carrier's bow, but at the water ahead of it. The other 2 continue their slow outward drift, widening the angle just enough to make an easy exit less likely. This is not pursuit. This is shaping. Inside the Combat Information Center, the Surface Warfare Coordinator does not speculate. He measures. Formation is intentional. No one disagrees. Speed remains at 24 knots. Not maximum speed, controlled speed, chosen speed. Fast enough to close the gap, slow enough to signal restraint. A carefully tuned point of pressure. The carrier's navigation solution updates again. With the current vectors, any course change now would reduce CPA with at least one contact. Turning away would look like evasion. Turning toward would tighten the trap. So the carrier does neither. She holds her line. At 5:35, electronic support measures detect intermittent emissions from the lead ship. Short pulses, low power. Not a fire control lock. Not search radar either. Probing behavior, testing response times, measuring reactions. The data is logged, waveform stored, source identified. Up on deck, nothing outwardly changes. The Seahawk continues its slow lateral drift, holding a wide orbit. Its sensors take over. Forward-looking infrared locks onto the exhaust trails, confirming sustained high output from the approaching ships. They are not drifting. They are pushing forward with intent. Still no radio calls from the North Korean vessels. That silence carries weight. Experienced crews communicate their movements, even in tense situations. At this distance, staying quiet removes uncertainty in only one direction. At 5:37, the outer ship on the port side adjusts its course. Just 3 degrees, but enough to reshape the carrier's maneuvering space. The CPA updates again, 1.8 nautical miles. The watch team calls it out calmly, not as a warning, just as a fact. On the bridge, the captain studies the horizon ahead. No binoculars, no raised voice. He doesn't need them. The ship is already telling the full story. Below, CIC cross-checks optical feeds with radar returns. Hull numbers remain hidden. Paint is clean. Weapons are still covered. But deck crews are clearly visible. Helmets on, movements precise, focused, nothing casual. At 5:39, the lead ship eases its speed slightly, down to 22 knots. That small change says everything. This is not a rush. It's controlled pacing. They are guiding the carrier toward a specific point at a specific moment, with fewer and fewer options. Pressure without direct contact. The Seahawk zooms in on the lead ship's bridge windows. Heat signatures cluster inside. More personnel than a routine watch. Eyes forward, hands close to rails. Every frame is recorded, every second archived. At 5:41, the carrier's escorts tighten formation. Not visibly, not dramatically, but enough for their radar coverage to fully overlap. To the eye, nothing changes. To the systems, the picture becomes complete. The North Korean ships keep closing. 1 nautical mile, then 9/10. Still no communication. At this point, the silence speaks louder than any signal ever could. Inside CIC, the rules are clear. Shadowing ends the moment maneuvering space is deliberately restricted. This is no longer coincidence, no longer navigation. This is intent. But intent alone does not trigger a response. A line has to be crossed. At 5:43, the starboard side ship makes its move. A deliberate bow-in adjustment. Not aggressive in speed, but unmistakable in angle. It is no longer trying to pass or trail. It is positioning itself ahead of the carrier's path. To block. The room goes completely still. No alarms, no raised voices. Only the quiet tapping of keyboards as the track updates and CPA recalculates. 1.3 nautical miles. That number sits inside a space where misunderstandings no longer apply. The carrier stays on course. The Seahawk holds position, steady and neutral. But at this distance, neutrality is still visible. Everything is being observed, everything recorded. Every decision will be reviewed later, frame by frame. This is the moment where posturing either ends or becomes something else entirely. And the approaching ships know it. From here on, the responsibility shifts. It no longer sits with the carrier. It belongs to the ship still closing in. At 5:45 local time, the distance drops below 1 nautical mile. On its own, that number is not unusual. Ships pass closer than that every day in crowded waters. But this is open ocean. No traffic, no weather, no reason for proximity. Inside CIC, the track history scrolls across the display. Every movement traced in clean digital lines. The pattern is no longer forming. It is complete. The lead North Korean ship alters course again. This time, the move is obvious. The bow swings inward, cutting directly across the carrier's path instead of pacing alongside it. Speed remains steady. The wake spreads wide. This is not navigation. This is obstruction. The Surface Warfare Coordinator states it plainly. The contact is maneuvering to block. CPA drops below 1,000 yards. That is the line. On the bridge, the captain watches the horizon with nothing but the naked eye. No optics, no hesitation. He has seen this pattern before. So has everyone else. At this distance, a blocking move forces a decision. Turn away and give up space. Turn toward and risk collision. Or hold course and make the other side choose. The carrier holds course. Below decks, the ship's posture shifts again. Subtle but complete. Systems that were waiting are now ready. Displays change tone. Tracking narrows. The shift is quiet but absolute. The Seahawk slides slightly, keeping the blocking ship centered. The camera tightens just enough to reveal the forward gun mount. Covered. Not active, but sailors are nearby, hands close. At 5:47, the distance shrinks inside 800 yards. At this range, intent doesn't need interpretation. Movement alone defines it. The escorts maintain position, not closing in, not pulling away. Their presence fills the electromagnetic space, even if it's not obvious to the eye. No radio calls, no signals, no warnings. Everything that matters is already visible. Inside CIC, one system transitions quietly from monitoring to active readiness. No announcement, just confirmation on the console. Logged, time-stamped. The blocking ship continues its intercept path, and then, for the first time, it hesitates. The correction slows. The rudder angle eases. Only slightly, just enough for the system to detect it. The hesitation lasts less than 5 seconds, but it changes everything. Because in that moment, the decision on the other bridge shifts. Not about control, about consequence. At 5:49, the second North Korean ship makes its move, but not the one expected. Instead of tightening its position, it widens the turn. The formation begins to lose its balance. The clean symmetry breaks. What was once a controlled fan starts to drift unevenly. The lead ship reacts, adjusting again, trying to regain control of the geometry. But the moment has already slipped. The carrier's steady, unchanged course has pushed the decision back onto them. Commit to the block or step away. From the Seahawk, the sensor operator zooms in further. Faces are now visible behind the bridge glass. Heat signatures rise and fall as people move quickly inside. Hands gesture. Someone points forward, then down toward instruments. Inside CIC, the plot updates instantly. The CPA stabilizes, then begins to increase. 900 yards, 1,100, 1,400. The blocking maneuver dissolves into a parallel track. The carrier never moved. At 5:52, the lead North Korean ship reduces speed. The wake shortens. The bow lifts slightly as power eases back. The signal is clear. A step back, without turning away. The other two ships follow, each drifting outward by a few degrees. Separation returns gradually, one vector at a time. No radio calls, no signals. None are needed. The encounter ends the same way it began, quietly. But something fundamental has shifted. The sea is still calm. The horizon still looks empty. But control of the situation has changed, and it will not shift back. The North Korean ships remain nearby, still visible on sensors and optics, but their formation no longer restricts movement. Their speed no longer applies pressure. Their positioning no longer threatens. They pushed forward and found a limit that did not move. By 5:55, the CPA has opened beyond 2 nautical miles. The Seahawk widens its orbit. The carrier continues on its original heading, wake steady, speed unchanged. No reactions, no commentary. Just the quiet understanding that the most critical moment is already behind them, and that the outcome was decided not by force, but by who held steady. By 5:58 local time, the situation shifts into a new phase. Distance is increasing, the geometry is loosening, but no one relaxes. This is often the most sensitive window. Inside CIC, the tracks remain firmly locked. Not aggressive, just constant. Every change in bearing, every throttle adjustment, every signal emission continues to be recorded. The system does not forget simply because the pressure has eased. The 3 North Korean ships are no longer closing, but they have not fully left either. They hold position at a distance, offset from the carrier's port and starboard sides. Visible, but no longer pressing. A shift in posture, not retreat, observation. The Seahawk climbs slightly, expanding its sensor coverage. From above, the change is clear. The once coordinated formation now drifts unevenly, each ship making its own adjustments instead of moving as one. That loss of synchronization matters. Tight formations apply pressure. Fragmented ones absorb it. At 6:01, electronic systems detect one last low-power radar emission from the northernmost ship. Brief, wide, not targeting, just scanning. A final look. The signal is captured and stored, added to a growing library of data that now reveals more than the other side likely intended. On the bridge, the captain says nothing. His focus stays forward, not behind. That silence tells the crew everything. This encounter is only over if it remains over. Below decks, readiness holds. Nothing stands down. No one resets until distance and behavior confirm it. At 6:04, the southernmost ship adjusts course away by 5 degrees. Not dramatic, but deliberate. Its wake curves outward, widening the gap. Within minutes, the others follow. The formation dissolves in reverse. No sharp turns, no visible tension, just distance, regained mile by mile. The carrier remains unchanged, speed steady, heading constant, wake uninterrupted. That consistency is not passive. It is controlled. The Seahawk continues tracking until the ships fade beyond visual clarity. Hull shapes blur into heat signatures, then into simple markers on a screen. At 6:08, the closest ship slows below 15 knots, well below the speed needed to influence anything nearby. At that point, the message is clear. This is no longer maneuvering. This is disengagement. Inside CIC, the update is entered plainly. Contacts increasing separation, no longer restricting movement. That line ends the tactical phase, but not the record. At 6:12, the carrier's escorts return to standard spacing. Nothing dramatic, nothing visible to the eye. The sensor picture remains layered, but the focus shifts from readiness to observation. The ocean regains its quiet appearance. But nothing about this moment is ordinary. No shots were fired, no warnings given, no messages exchanged, and yet something lasting has taken place. Every signal, every course correction, every pause at the edge of escalation has been captured and preserved. The North Korean ships revealed more than intent. They revealed limits, how close they were willing to come, how far they were willing to push, and exactly where they chose to stop. That information will remain long after this moment fades. By 6:16, the nearest contact is beyond 5 nautical miles and still increasing. Visual contact is gone, only radar symbols remain, slowly shrinking toward the horizon. The Seahawk returns to the deck, landing smoothly, rotors slow without urgency. The aircraft is secure. The footage is already archived. On the bridge, the captain finally shifts his gaze, not toward where the ships were, but toward where the carrier is headed. Forward. No one speaks about winning. There is no victory in restraint, only confirmation. That pressure was applied. That escalation was controlled. And that in open water, control does not always make noise. Sometimes it is defined by what never happens, and by who never had to move. By 6:21 local time, the ocean has reclaimed its distance. The three ships are now miles apart, their tracks steadily diverging. No longer coordinated, no longer relevant. On radar, they become routine contacts. On the horizon, they are already gone. The carrier never changed course. More than anything else, that is the detail that defines the entire encounter. Inside the Combat Information Center, the logs close out on their own. Timestamps are fixed, sensor feeds are stored, emission libraries are updated. What had been a live situation becomes a permanent record. Nothing is lost, nothing is exaggerated. This is how moments like these end when they are managed the right way. No announcement comes over the ship's speakers, no dramatic remarks, no speeches after the fact. Sailors simply return to work without discussion. On the flight deck, operations pick back up at a steady pace. Catapults cycle, aircraft are repositioned. The normal rhythm comes back, but the ship is not quite the same as it was an hour earlier. Because moments like this are never really about distance. They are about judgment. The North Korean ships did not fail because they came too close. Navies do that regularly. They failed because they believed pressure by itself would be enough to force a response. They believed movement would create leverage. They believed restraint was the same as uncertainty. That was the miscalculation. The carrier's strength was never about speed. It was never about turning harder or moving faster. It was about refusal. Refusal to be hurried. Refusal to give up space. Refusal to escalate on someone else's timing. In open water, control belongs to the side that sets the tempo without abandoning its course. The North Korean formation crossed the line from shadowing to obstruction. They deliberately reduced maneuvering room. They advanced without communication. And when the critical moment arrived, they hesitated. That hesitation decided everything. The instant doubt enters an intercept, control is already slipping away. By holding course, the carrier placed the choice back where it belonged, on the ships attempting to apply the pressure, block and commit, or break away and give ground. They chose the second option because escalation without a real advantage is not strength, it is vulnerability. Every Navy understands that, whether it says so publicly or not. No weapons were used during the encounter, but that does not mean nothing was exchanged. Information moved in one direction, behavior patterns were exposed, thresholds became clear, limits were mapped, and those details do not fade with time. The North Korean ships left the scene having learned exactly how close they could come before pressure stopped working. The carrier moved on, having learned something even more valuable. It never needed to move at all. By 6:30, the final contact slips beyond the primary surveillance ring. The radar picture clears. The sea returns to one dominant shape, steady, centered, unchallenged. The carrier continues its mission. This moment will likely never become a public story. No footage, no official statement, no dramatic map replayed for the world to see. Most people will never know it happened, and that is exactly the point. Real control is usually quiet. The most serious confrontations are often the ones resolved without spectacle, without noise, and without anyone beyond the ship ever realizing how narrow the margin truly was. The clearest message that morning was not delivered by radio, by missile, or by maneuver. It came from a ship that did not flinch. Because in the end, the biggest mistake was not sending 3 warships toward a U.S. aircraft carrier. The biggest mistake was believing the carrier would have to answer at all.